we will kick things off. I'm really excited to dive into this topic of myth busting local seafood with Sophie Scott, who is the Sustainable Seafood Project Manager at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. And Sophie's a the Sustainable Seafood Project Manager, where she works to get more underloved and underutilized Gulf of Maine species onto our plates and into our hearts to help support an economically and ecologically sound seafood industry in the Gulf of Maine. So with that, I will turn it over to Sophie to take it away.
Thanks, Simca. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in as we bust some seafood myths. Like Simca said, I'm Sophie, and I'll also be joined this afternoon by Mike Flynn, who's the nutrition director at RSU 12 in Sheepscot Valley area in Maine, which is all the way from Palermo down to Westport Island. And it looks like he's got a lovely class of sixth graders joining him as well. And you'll also get to hear from Melanie Wilk, who's the Director of Food Service at Chicopee Public Schools in Massachusetts. So before I dive in, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself and make sure that my slide will advance. So I'm going to click it again. Let's see, technical, here we go. Except to skip. Okay, there we go. So my name's Sophie. I grew up in a fishing family in Mid-Coast, Maine. My dad's been an urchin diver for the past 35 years. And it's not just my dad. My uncles, aunties, brother, cousins are all or have been fishermen on both the East and West Coast. Seafood is very much in my blood and family culture, so it makes sense that I've ended up here at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. So again, as Simca mentioned in the introduction, I am a Sustainable Seafood Project Manager. Our goal on the seafood team is really to strengthen the economic and ecological sustainability in the Gulf of Maine. And one way that we do that is by getting more of our local and responsibly harvested seafood out into the marketplace. But why seafood? Well, we really believe that seafood is an important solution to some of the most pressing challenges that are facing our region today. Climate impacts to our environment, chronic disease impacts to our health, and the changing forces in our regional economy. So where does local seafood fit into farm and school? If you're Mass Farm and School, you are good and you put it right here in your name. And for the USD, I think it could fit in nicely right here. So we've been really good at getting local produce into our schools. We've been really good about getting milk and eggs into our schools, local cheese. We've been good at getting local meats to our schools, but more often or not, seafood is an afterthought in the farm to school movement. Seafood has never gotten the attention that myself or other seafood centric folks think it deserves. And, this is really such a shame, not only because here we are in New England, where we have such a rich history around local seafood, but also because getting local seafood into schools has so many incredible benefits. So like other local foods, local seafood is good for our economy, it's good for our community, it's good for an environment. Eating local seafood helps support our local economy, and this is notable given that 90% of the seafood we eat in this country is imported. So eating local seafood keeps those dollars here in New England. We also know that eating local seafood supports fishermen, working waterfronts, and all the businesses and communities that support and are supported by seafood. And we know that seafood and eating local seafood is good for the environment, not only because seafood is a climate-friendly protein option, but because seafood in our region is abundant and responsibly harvested. What's more is that seafood is incredibly nutritious. It's a protein with benefits. It's so good for heart health, brain development, and overall well-being. Seafood is especially good for kids. It's rich in vitamins A and D and omega-3 fatty acids, all of which are important for good growth and development. It's good for your brain. It's good for your heart. It gives you strong bones, healthy eyes, less stress, better immune system. You name it, seafood is the solution. So, given all this, we know that seafood can make a big impact in schools. As Americans, we are generally not eating enough seafood. Only 1 in 10 of us are getting the recommended 2 servings per week. We also know that students on average get about 1/3 of their daily calories from school. So we see this as a great opportunity to give kids a really healthy food at school that has such an enormous benefits to their health, to our economy, community, environment in New England. And given that local seafood is only showing up in a small percentage of schools across New England, we believe we can do more to bring local seafood to kids across our region. So this was the aim and goals of a USDA Farm to School grant that we've been working on for the past couple of years. So in this grant, we took a 3-pronged approach to increasing the amount of local seafood that was served at schools. Schools made a commitment and set a goal around serving local seafood, and then GMRI essentially helped them meet that goal. We provided support around procurement issues, as well as offered some engagement and education resources. With this grant, we partnered with 8 school districts across the region, ranging from small districts in rural Vermont, all the way up to big schools like New Bedford that have over 14,000 kids. So as it was outlined in the previous slides, we know that seafood, and specifically local seafood, is amazing for so many reasons. So if it's the bee's knees, the cat's pajamas, the fish's wishes, why aren't we serving it in schools? So when we talk about getting seafood into K-12 schools, inevitably we hear these 3 things. Kids don't like seafood. Seafood is hard to work with or difficult to prepare, and local seafood is hard to get your hands on. These are myths. Let's bust these myths. You guys ready? Let's go. All right, so myth 1, kids don't like seafood. Fact, kids do like seafood. And okay, no, while I can't say that every single kid loves seafood, what I can say, and what I can say with confidence, that the general sentiment that kids don't like seafood is just not true. While there isn't a ton of peer-reviewed literature that supports this, what we do know is that kids' food preferences are influenced and shaped by their parents, caregivers, teachers, and other adults that they look up to. You know, my almost 2-year-old loves fish. We eat a lot of fish at home. I mean, we get sushi and he'll eat all of the roe off the top of it and happily demand more fish eggs, mama. We also know that taste is something that is developed. At GMRI, we are fortunate to have a colleague who previously worked with trying to get people and kids really to eat more bugs. And through that work, he discovered that when it comes to taste and food preference, related exposure and really just an opportunity to try something new is really impactful. So we did this in our Farm to School grant. So we did a few taste tests at some of our partner schools where we gave kids the opportunity to try seafood and asked, you know, did you like it? And overwhelmingly, the answer was yes. So these are the results from a few different schools. In the top right-hand corner, 70% of the students who tried seafood at Portland Elementary loved it. At Auburn Middle School in the bottom right, 83% of the students loved it. And at Auburn High School is what you see on the left, 72% of students who tried the seafood liked it. So, you know, yes, this is just a few examples of taste tests, but this is what we hear from folks who are doing this work in other places too. So in addition to the voting, we hear so many comments about the fish. And because I just see a note here that Mike's students are leaving, I would just love to give them the opportunity to chime in and let us know from a student perspective what they think about the local fish that is available in their school. So Mike, I'm gonna go ahead and
Is now a good time,
yeah,
Sophie?
go for it. Yep.
Oh, wait,
Oh, did we
hi,
lose-
guys. What do you all think of the fish at RSU 12? Is it okay?
Thank you, Mike. And I'm going to give Mike another chance to chime in and tell us a little bit more about his perspective. But before I do that, I just want to share a couple stories that really make me smile when doing this work in K through 12 cafeterias. So when we visited the school in the Portland Elementary, one student came into the cafeteria and walked over to see, what we were giving out a sample of. And when he discovered it was fish, he was really vocal and adamant, saying, "Fish isn't food. Fish are friends. Don't eat fish. Nobody should eat fish." Very, very loud, like the whole cafeteria could hear. And so we're like, okay, you don't have to eat fish. You don't have to try it. Went along with the taste test, and a few minutes later, he sort of sheepishly came over and said, "So everybody says that it's really good. Can I try some?" And we're like, "Yeah, of course you can." And he put it in his mouth, and I watched his eyes get really big, and his smile lights up, and he's like, "This is amazing. Oh my goodness." And then, just as vocal as he was, like proclaiming how we shouldn't eat fish and fish is gross, it just turned around, and he really just shared to the world how delicious the fish was. And I'm going to tell one more story, because it's one that really makes my heart sing. And this happened at one of the schools in Mike's district. And this was shared with me by his colleague, Vicki. And a teacher at a school in Whitefield asked her student, "So, Robbie, are you going to be getting hot lunch today?" And Robbie looks up at the teacher and says, "Miss Brown, I only get hot lunch on fish day." And at this particular school, they serve fish every Friday, and that student will only get hot lunch when the fish is served. Again, you don't have to take my word for it. We're going to hear from Mike again, and also Melanie Wilk, who's the director of food service at Chicopee Public Schools in Massachusetts. And Mike, just give you time to walk to wherever you're going. We're going to hear from Melanie first. And Melanie, I'm going to unmute you and spotlight you too. So we'd love to hear your experience at your school.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm a little under the weather, so excuse my froggy voice.
No
Hi, yeah, so I'm the director of food service in Chicopee, Mass. And we have been working with local seafood for probably the last 5 years and trying lots of different products, which I think is definitely one of the most important things that you can do, is just to try different products, because no product is the same. Kids might like one product. It's just like, chicken nuggets at the store. My kids really like one brand of chicken nuggets, but the other ones they don't like so much. So trying different products to figure out what the kids really gravitate towards has been really good for us. So we've tried, different companies and different products, and we landed on, a few that we know are always hits with the kids. We've done taste tests in our cafeteria lines, just to, get a little excitement going and let them try the product before it's actually on the menu. And then when we put it on the menu, we try to kind of hype it up and make it fun. One of the things that we did recently in March, it was Dr. Seuss's birthday, which was literally the perfect time to do one fish, two fish, fish sticks on the menu. And we used the Red's Best fish sticks out of Boston and menued those with some other fun kind of Dr. Seuss related things. It was like one fish, two fish, fish sticks with red fish, blue fish Jello, and just made a really fun menu. And we, posted it on all of our social media with a picture and a description of what was happening, so the parents could see. And then also all the cafeterias, the elementaries in particular would, decorate for Dr. Seuss Day and have different, fish hanging from the ceiling and things like that. So it made the kids really excited. And that was one of the most popular meals in March. So things like that. And then for the older kids, the middle and high school kids, we tend to menu it in a different way and do something like use the local fish sticks in fish tacos, which is kind of, a trendy, fun thing. So opposed to, a beef taco that we serve a lot, it's like a fun riff on that. And we do it with, a homemade slaw and a special sauce. So it's definitely kind of feels almost a little more upscale for them. Rather than just the fish sticks on a plate that we might serve to an elementary student. So knowing your audience and knowing the students that you're serving is also really important. So I also think something huge that Sophie kind of mentioned is not only the student buy-in, but the staff buy-in. Like if the staff doesn't like fish or like a product, they might relay that to the student just in, their face or their expression. But we've found these products, and in particular, those Red's Best fish sticks have just been a home run. Our staff loves that product. They really do. And so when they menu it, they encourage the kids to take it. Instead of kind of like blah fish sticks, what else is on the menu? They're like, what? Try these fish sticks, guys. I promise they're delicious. They're delicious. So that is also a huge thing, is not just the kids, but getting your cafeteria staff to buy in as well. So let them taste the product before they serve it and maybe give input as to, cooking methods or how to serve it or a sauce with it or things like that. But yeah, so we were trying to menu fish every other month, but at this point with those really good products that we found, we've actually been doing it once a month for the past like half a year. So it's been really, really great.
That's so awesome, Melanie. And you really just like set me up very well. For
I didn't even know what you were going to say next.
It was perfect.
Thanks.
So thanks. And we'll ask you to chime in again a little bit later on. But right now, Mike, we'd love to hear from you on how you've been successful and how your students have really taken to the fish that you're serving at your schools.
Great. Thank you, Sophie. And thanks for letting our sixth graders say hello to you a few minutes ago. I hope it came through. Pardon, it's released now, so you'll be getting some background. Yeah, we've been having a great time. Today in particular, we were working with seaweed, and for the kids to even taste that, the fish opportunities we've been doing created a great platform for it. So what we've been doing is a lot of classroom tastings before we roll it out on the menu. When the fish opportunity began here a year ago, or even more than that, we menued whatever white fish was available. We would receive it fresh. There was a choice of fresh or frozen. Fresh was our option selection because we could prep it, menu it, and or freeze it right away for storage and menuing later. And that became a good practice for us. So we became very fast at production. We were able to store the fish in volumes of 400 to 600 pounds at a time. We usually yielded around 4 portions per pound after we do a minimal processing. So it's been pretty productive. We stick with a simple crusted recipe. Sophie has it on her website, where the kids have enjoyed it and given us feedback where now we're cooking it at a higher temp. So it's a little bit crispier for longer while we're going through the line system. So right now we're menuing it at least twice a month. So every other week, it's on the menu, whether it's in a burger form. We'll just use the same 4-ounce portion, crusted. We do a crust with Parmesan and bread, a little dipping in oil, and then into the crumb and into the oven. So with that one piece, we'll offer it as an entree with fries, like a fish and chips, or we'll offer it as a burger with fries or something else. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing now. And again, with fish in the menu and the fact that the kids are eating it with more of a common welcome, now we're doing seaweed. So their minds are opening a bit, asking more questions, so we can do more with what we have readily available, which is our Gulf of Maine. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Mike. That was great. It's so good to hear. Mike and Melanie are the experts. So thanks so much for sharing your perspective. So I think we've busted this first myth, right? Let's see if my slides will advance again. Yeah, here we go. Kids do like seafood. Myth 1 is busted. Let's move on to myth 2. So this is another thing that we hear over and over again. Fish is difficult to prepare. When the fact is that, really fish is no more difficult to prepare than any other raw proteins. Of course, it can be understandable if you or your staff don't have familiarity or experience working with seafood. Maybe it would take a little bit extra time and capacity. And obviously, I know that during this crazy time, during the pandemic with staffing issues and other things, it could just be an extra thing that you just don't have the space for. However, working with fish is really not that difficult. And you just heard a little bit from Mike about their process. And here he is working with his colleague, Vicky. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you did this demonstration for us, you were able to process 100 pounds of fish. So cutting, weighing, breading it to be put in the freezer in about 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yes, we've been getting pretty efficient at it. We know when it's going to show up at the doorstep, so we set up for that timing. We can even plan for it to arrive at a certain moment so that we can be efficient. We're using, we do have a video at Department of Ed, Maine's Farm and Sea to School activity of our approach in processing and our approach with food safety. So there's 2 clips for this type of work that we've shared or designed for them to share further if you'd like. I'll try to attach the links in the shared
Sure,
chat.
yeah, Mike, if you want to drop those links in, and then at the end of the presentation too, I have a link to our resource hub, which also has a link to those videos.
Oh, wonderful. So maybe
another thing that I'll just share here around the sort of myth around preparation is that one of the schools that we've worked with, from the get-go, they said, I will not work with a fillet of fish. I only want something that is ready to bake, that I can just stick in the oven and cook. They had a chance to have some fresh fillets of fish for free. And with that opportunity and the ability to sort of try it risk-free in a way, they now don't want to purchase a ready to bake product. They're happy working with the fillet. So it's just to show, like, he went from this nutrition director went from saying like, no way, never ever, to actually, this isn't that hard. Now it's what I want to work with. And then just on the other side of that, you heard Melanie talk about her experience with the Red Best fish sticks, which is what you see here. And we know that we're really lucky to have some ready to bake products that are made with local seafood. So here you see in the top right some spicy fish taga. tacos, and also in the bottom left is fish in a blanket. These are both made with a dogfish nugget. And again, you're not having to cut fillets, you're not having to do any prep work. You can really do a lot of creative things with a fish stick or a dogfish nugget. So I think what this shows Mike's experience working with fillets of fish and other schools who we've partnered with, who really can demonstrate that it's not as hard as people have the perception of, and having the accessibility and availability of local ready to bake products makes it even easier. So I think we can successfully say that the second myth is busted. So seafood can be easy to prepare. So the last myth here is that local fish can be hard to procure. The fact is that in Massachusetts, local fish can be easy to procure. And I just want to point out two things here. Notice the can be and notice the Massachusetts, because the truth is that depending where you are in New England, seafood can be hard to procure in normal times and borderline impossible in the pandemic. In Massachusetts, there are some great, relatively easy ways to source local seafood. So what you see here is the list that Massachusetts Farm to School has put together around local seafood vendors. We know that the MAPC has a seafood contract where they work with 2 local seafood processors, Red's Best and North Coast, to have local fish available for K through 12 schools. And at GMRI, we have a program called the Gulf of Maine Responsibly Harvested Program, where we work with a number of seafood processors and dealers in the region who specialize in local seafood. So we're also here as a resource when it comes to procurement. So that's Massachusetts. Elsewhere in New England, you can run into some serious procurement challenges. So I'm going to tell you a couple, or really one story about what we encountered in Vermont. So we partnered with 2 school districts in Vermont. They had the same vendor, and that vendor didn't carry local seafood. On our end, we did everything we really could as a non-customer to talk to various folks about bringing in local seafood. We tried to brainstorm different ways to get local seafood into those schools. And I just want to pause and note that this past year has been really incredibly challenging for schools. Supply chain issues, shortages, no staff. I mean, these folks do a wonderful job of feeding children literally every day. And this year has been really, really hard. So for one of our schools in Vermont, they just didn't have the capacity to do any more than they could. So that school, unfortunately, was not able to procure local seafood. On the other hand, the other school had a little bit more capacity and went above and beyond to make some connections. So big props go out to Carol Kent, who's the school nutrition director up at Lamoille North and in Vermont. And she found out that a seafood market a couple towns over was sourcing seafood from the same company where she wanted to purchase some ready to bake items that were available for the K through 12 school. And so she worked it out with a seafood processor, which is Red's Best, you can see here, and Stowe Seafood. And so Stowe Seafood, when they go down to Boston and pick up their fish for their market, they also pick up fish for the school. So this is just, a story of, really going above and beyond, and maybe friendly Vermont neighbors, and finding a creative solution to a challenge. And, they've successfully been serving fish to their students once a month for the entire year. So again, we know that procurement is like maybe the myth that is the trickiest to bust, because if your school's like primary vendor doesn't carry local seafood, it can be tough. And in Maine, not all of these larger broadliners source local seafood. So you really need to know where to look for local fish if your primary vendor can't carry it. Which again, especially this year, giving time, capacity, staffing, resources can be really hard. So in Maine, our schools were lucky enough to have this wonderful program emerge as a response to the pandemic. So the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association have been running a program called Fishermen Feeding Mainers for over a year now. And what they do is they pay fishermen a fair, decent price for their catch, and then they turn around and donate it to food banks and local schools. So Mike has been able to get, wonderful, fresh Gulf of Maine fish for his schools. And this is an opportunity that a number of schools have been able to take advantage of too. And so the school that I told the story about having the opportunity to work with fresh fillets risk-free, they're using this Fisherman's Feeding Mainer fish as well. So again, a little bit trickier to bust in the broad sense, but what we can say is that in Massachusetts, there are great options for sourcing local seafood in K through 12 schools. So we can bust this third myth here. So you've tuned in to today's session. All these things you've been hearing, that kids don't like seafood, that seafood's hard to prepare, that seafood's difficult to procure, aren't true. And now you're ready to start your local seafood adventure and start serving more local seafood to your students. So to help you in this honorable intention, I just want to share a few tips that we learned in our Farm to School grant. So the first is that taste tests really work. It gives the students an opportunity to try something without having to commit to the full meal. I think you heard from both Mike and Melanie that they did taste tests, and it's an opportunity for kids to try something. But we found that to be successful, you really need to do it more than once. Remember earlier when I mentioned the benefit of repeated exposure in developing taste, give kids the chance to taste fish once, twice, 3 times. By the third time, they'll be coming back for thirds. Taste tests are also an opportunity to try out different preparations and get feedback from students on preference. So it's a great chance to, maybe you want to try out a new recipe, just give kids an opportunity to try it and then also give feedback. Again, this gets back to what I shared in the beginning. Kids look up to you, and what you show them matters and influences them. And Melanie spoke to this too. More often than not, when we hear adults saying kids don't like seafood, what they're really saying is that they don't like seafood. So here you see Annalise Johnson, who on Fish Day made some fish melons to, just drum out some enthusiasm around fish. And what you heard from Melanie and what we hear from the school nutrition director in Vermont is that at the schools where the staff is enthusiastic, is encouraging, is supportive and excited, those schools always do more seafood. I think it's easy to not think that maybe you have a lot of influence, but you are a role model, and modeling, excitement around seafood really does make a big difference. Or you could take a leaf out of Chickpea's book and go viral on TikTok with this video. Is the video playing? Okay, cool. That had music, but I had to do a recording so you can't hear. So just imagine like a really catchy tune in the background. Another way is really to tell people what you're doing, get support and buy-in from the broader community, have them help spread the word. When you're working in school nutrition, I mean, you're wearing a ton of different hats, you're doing a lot of different work. You probably don't have a ton of extra room to share all of the great work that you're doing. So find people who will be your cheerleaders and share all of the great work that you're doing. Make connections to the classroom or the community, because we know that this can make a big impact on students' preferences in the cafeteria as well. This one can be tough, but find someone in your school who is excited. Find the teachers who are always in the lunch line when you serve local seafood. What's great about seafood and connecting it to the classroom is that, you know, it really can be incorporated into so many curriculums: science, social studies, health, history, economy. It's really versatile in like which way you want to connect it to the classroom. Set yourself up for success. I think, again, this is something that Melanie really touched on. You know, different age groups respond to different things. The younger groups had so much fun with the Dr. Seuss Day. We heard from other schools that, you know, make it a little bit familiar. Fish in a blanket. Maybe they haven't had fish in a blanket, but they could have had pigs in a blanket. We heard from other schools that just marketing a fish sandwich as fillet of fish always makes kids choose it more often. I feel like little kids also like dipping things in sauces. So that's another fun way to get kids more excited about eating seafood at the elementary level. Middle school, I think, is just tough in general. My husband is a middle school teacher. I have a lot of empathy for him. Middle schoolers are very peer motivated. So find the cool kids and get them to post on TikTok about how the local seafood in the cafeteria is so delicious. And again, Melanie touched on this, that the high schoolers are a little bit more adventurous. Fish tacos are in vogue, so putting that on the menu makes them more likely to try it. We've also heard that flavoring is something that the older kids like a more bold flavors. So sriracha or buffalo, use these sort of like popular spices to get kids at higher levels to be more excited about seafood. And then, you know, one way is really to connect seafood to students' interests. So we hear more and more with these younger generations that they're really concerned about, you know, how climate is impacting food systems. So you can market local seafood as a climate-friendly option, and maybe that's a way to get kids interested in local seafood too. And I just want to get audience input here. I put up this picture for a reason on this slide, and I'm wondering if any of you want to take a stab as why this picture is here. So type into the chat why maybe I'm showing this when I'm talking about setting yourself up for success. Nobody's typing. I'm gonna give it another minute just because. Okay. Fish first. Okay, Greta, that's a good one. Position this as the best option. Making it seem more appealing with descriptive words. Okay, these are all great. This is awesome. Andrea is saying lots of details for the fish dish. Okay, so the reason why I put it up is they're serving fish on pizza day. Like, maybe don't have fish compete with pizza day would be a good option to like do more with it. I will say, like, on this day, we were having a taste test with the fish, and they served the most fish they ever had that day. But still, I feel like pizza day is something that still, like, when I was in school, like, everybody got hot lunch on that day. And I think it's still what I hear from nutrition directors, that's still definitely a thing. So one thing that this school, when they did a second taste test in in the spring is that they also held it on pizza day, but they said that if you got fish, you would be entered into a drawing to have a personal pizza day the next time. So like incentives work as well. All right. So just to sort of wrap up here, because I want to make sure there are questions, and if Mike and Melanie have any more to add, we at GMRI have compiled a resource hub for Seed to School. It has over 50 recipes that are specifically developed for the K through 12 space. It has links to the videos that Mike was referencing. It has Seed to School guides, it has taste test guides, and it has seafood related lessons and activities, as well as posters that we have developed at GMRI that you can use in your classrooms. So with that, I'm going to open it up, and we have about 15 minutes. And I know, let's stop sharing my slides. I know it's a smaller group here too. So if you're comfortable and want to show your video, and maybe we can have a little bit more of a conversation, I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks so much, Sophie. Yeah, so folks should feel free to take yourself off of mute. If you have a question, you're also welcome to drop questions into the chat if you feel more comfortable doing that.
I'd like to add a thought.
Yeah.
Just share some gratitude of this activity. Our sixth grade group that was with you in the first half hour or 20 minutes was very excited listening and excited to hear about school lunch being such a deep conversation. So thanks for making this happen.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for joining. I think that, you know, like maybe that's something that kids don't consider, that like as adults, we are like thinking a lot about school lunch and how to make it better and healthier. And yeah, so that's a great insight, Mike.
Thank you, Sophie, for all your work and everyone that's part of these concepts. It's really appreciated.
Chetna, did you have a question?
Yes. So Sophie, first of all, an awesome presentation, and I was captivated. I was like, first of all, I didn't even know what myths are floating around. So to know what myths are floating around and to bust them, this is wonderful. And as I wrote in my chat too, that it is sort of ironical. We are a coastal state, and almost the seafood is non-existent in school menus, and knowing that how, both environmentally, it is a much better sustainable resource. It's more humane compared to many other ways we grow or deal with livestock. And also just the idea that many of our schools in Massachusetts, especially in the disadvantaged, underserved communities, they just never get a chance to try this, right? Because so I think of this as such an amazing opportunity to like really promote in schools the concept that, and these myths are actually deep-seated among our students. We have done few focus groups, and they will always say, no, I don't eat fish. It's like, so we have to move beyond that. And I will actually definitely contact you later on before the school year ends, because we are planning a more robust, inclusive menu for next school year through our farm to school program. So we'll definitely reach out to you.
Absolutely, Chetna. Yeah, and you know, we do a lot of work in sort of the higher ed institutions, and when we do taste tests there, I mean, it's really like pulling your arm. I really have to almost force it down students' throats sometimes. But I mean, often when I say, oh, do you want to try some seafood? The first response was like, no, I don't like seafood. And I'll follow up, well, when was the last time you had some? And for a lot of these college
I'm almost thinking that I'm going to target the youngest students in our school than the oldest one. The younger ones are, again, easier to, and sort of make it work with our, as you were doing the presentation, I thought I would love to work with the art teacher to like create fish signs and what fish can do and all those things, and then bring it to our youngest, like the lower school cafeteria first, and then have them sort of like let the word sort of propagate among other older grades. So so I think I'm sure, Simka, we have Sophie's contact information in the participant list. So I'll reach out. But wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Chetna. Yeah, and I think that's a great, plan of action. The littler kids have had less time to be influenced by people saying that, seafood is gross or whatever. But I mean, when I was talking about the college kids, I'd get them to try it and they'd say, oh, this actually isn't this bad. So again, Stephen, did you have a question?
I do. Thank you so much. And thank you for the presentation. So I'm down on Cape Cod, and you can't drive 2 minutes here without running into a seafood place of some sort. So I think there's less of a barrier in terms of kids being familiar with seafood, but I'm wondering how much you find that cost is a challenge to schools in terms of fitting it into their budgets.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I think that it's a more expensive protein option. I mean, I'm not a budget person, but yeah, it's definitely something that we hear. I know that
Sophie, I could help a little on the budget.
go ahead, go for it, Mike.
If that's
Thanks,
okay.
Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Fishermen Feeding Mainers program really was the catapult to make it happen in Maine. There was some donors, some philanthropic folks that created an opportunity for schools to have this product during the pandemic. So the fishermen had a payday, as well as institutions have an opportunity. So that's really what made it possible. So yeah, so after that fact, now that we have a baseline, we realize, well, the kids will eat it. We will menu an option with it, so we don't offset and lose the sale that day in our participation. So to not offset our revenue need for the day. Well, to even cut better to the chase, we're finding that we can buy it based on what has happened the last 2 years. We're trying to make sure we're not buying it for premium, but we can get a whitefish while this program slows down, meaning the no cost program to schools. So that's how it started. So I wonder if in your region, maybe they could lean into what the Gulf of Maine Institute has done for our community, but also what the Fishermen Feeding Mainers program began and what is even now. There'll be a day, maybe next month, I get a phone call saying, Mike, fish is available. I'll stop, go get the 400 pounds that I'm allotted at no cost other than my travel and time. So that's what's created the baseline to get it.
While I was listening to this, I actually threw a quick email to a friend of mine who was and may still be with the Cape Cod Fishermen's Alliance. And I can remember some years back them doing various tastings at restaurants and such for a lot of the locally sourced fish, like a dogfish, for instance, which isn't used a whole lot. But you were referencing earlier that, Red is Best being able to use that in fish nuggets. And I didn't know and reached out, say, hey, are you guys doing anything with the schools at all here? It would be a great opportunity to keep some of that here right on the Cape.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if, Melanie, you have any insight into Stephen's question too, just around cost and affordability of including local seafood in your menuing, or even others on the call who have more insight than me as not a school nutrition person.
I think our big thing with our budget and kind of managing the more expensive items is just balance and just make sure you're using your USDA foods kind of to balance out the cost on the tray. Maybe go a little lighter that week on other farm to school, the more expensive things, or, menu the fish with, the commodity, frozen peas, or, a commodity peaches or something like that. Make the rest of the menu not so expensive, and it kind of helps to balance out the cost of the, the day or the week overall.
Great. Thank you
That's
so much.
great, Melanie. The one thing I would add to that is, and that we've heard from other school nutrition directors here in Massachusetts when we've done some different like seafood culinary trainings, is some of the recipes that we also have available like on our website do exactly what Melanie suggested, of pairing the item with USDA foods that the school is essentially getting at no cost, that makes the per plate cost reasonable, but also some of the relationships that they have with providers like a Red's Best that Sophie mentioned. What they're offering schools is like a catch of the day that might be any of a number of white flaky fish that could be prepared roughly the same way, but there is a guaranteed cost to that. So there's not the fluctuation in pricing. And so even if it might be a little bit more expensive, they then, sometimes it could be less expensive than what might be found just on the open market at that time. It's the stability is another thing that's just nice to have, that kind of predictability for menu planning purposes and staying within the budget.
And Simca, I'll just add, what's so great about all of our local whitefish is that they're really interchangeable in a menu. So if you're worried about your recipe for redfish and the catch of the day is pollock, things like that can be easily interchanged. So it really allows flexibility in that sense.
Okay. Thank you all so much.
I did see that Andrea asked about the funding of the Fishermen's Feedings Mainers program. I don't have a ton of knowledge, but and Mike might know more, but essentially the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association was grant funded, and I think raised money to be able to purchase the fish and then distribute it to the schools and the food banks.
Yeah, Sophie, that sounds familiar. There's another opportunity in Maine is where Child Nutrition Maine Services matches 1/3 of our local purchasing up to 15,000 for a district. So that's another avenue that we're doing that I don't know if Massachusetts has this kind of opportunity to promote additional funds and reimbursement when
Not yet, but we're working on it. So yeah, and I do think it is a great, looking for other incentives, or there's some other USDA programs coming that may be emerging that we hope will also be providing additional funds for local food. So that's a sort of thing we'll be letting folks know about and encourage your advocacy on when there are opportunities for that. Because I think, just as you said, Sophie, that just taking that risk away so that people can try it and not have any sort of budgetary concerns about trying it is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know we're close on time, but that is something like there can even be, I've heard like real fear from some school nutrition directors of like making a purchase of a protein that is more expensive than chicken, for example, and then just like having the kids not take it. And so it's a real concern, but like taking that risk away really has allowed some of them to be like, oh, we can do this and let's keep doing it.
Great. Well, we are just about at time. I want to thank Sophie and Mike and Melanie and for being with us today and sharing these great stories. Invite all of you guys to participate in more sessions for the throughout the week.